My guest today is Robert den Broeder. Robert spent many years as a coach and trainer, teaching people about service management and then helping them apply it. In his work, he recognised that most people see human behaviour as an important element in getting the maximum benefit from any framework, best practice or management philosophy. But very few people do anything about it. But Robert did. He studied the subject, then he wrote a book, Organisational Behaviour Management, developed a training program, and started a community of like-minded people. Robert has studied the impact of many acronyms like KPIs, SLAs and XLAs, and the impact they have on behaviour and performance. And it is very clear that organisations can correctly define the behaviour they want to see and encourage people to change. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Richard. It's good to be back on the show, so to
Thank
speak.
you very much. So, Robert, could you talk a little bit about organisational behaviour management, OBM, what it is, and who should be interested in it and why?
Of course. OBM is an approach to effectively address business challenges which have a major or a strong behavioral component. For instance, you may wish to improve in areas such as safety or compliance, quality or productivity. And you may wish to improve any aspect of your organizational culture. For instance, better live your corporate values, for instance. So sooner or later, you will conclude that you have to deal with the behavioral part in itself. And as my I would like to call him a mentor, but he's not really my mentor because we don't have the personal interaction with it. But as Aubrey Daniels puts it, business is behavior. Who should be interested? Well, basically anyone who works together with other people in order to get things done. So you could call them leaders, manager, project leader, project manager, coordinators, agile coaches, scrum masters, consultants. And why? Well, as business is behavior, the knowledge of OBM comes in handy when you want to create more value in your organization through value-adding behaviors. So you would like to have an answer on questions like, why don't people just do what we agreed that they should do? Or why don't they just simply follow the process? Or why don't they, I don't know, do what they should be doing? And in many cases, we see that people know what they should be doing. So they should follow processes. They should register all incoming calls in a service management tool, for instance. And somehow, at some point, they decide to deviate and show alternative behavior, so to speak. And with knowledge of OBM, you have much better understanding of why this happens and what you could do to improve or remedy the situation.
Is it as obvious as that you see someone, to use your expression, deviating from the plan or deviating from the process, and that with a little bit more insight into behaviour, you can actually identify the issue behind it, or do you just identify that the behaviour is out of the norm, and then you talk to the individual to try to understand the reason behind it?
I think that the starting point should be that behavior always serves a purpose. And understanding the purpose of this behavior helps you understand why the behavior occurs. And once you understand why the behavior occurs, you can come up with, most of the time, very simple interventions in order to correct it. Mind you that behavioral change rarely is a cognitive problem. It's a motivational issue. So you have to understand why people choose to deviate. Sometimes it's, oh, I didn't know it like that and I need to do it like so. And then they simply correct themselves based on new knowledge or new instructions. But yeah, if you look at the field of ITIL service management, they know what to do. and they know what the process is like, and they know blah, blah, blah. And then still they choose to do things differently. You cannot tell me that the systems manager or systems administrator knows that he or she should test software before bringing it live. Sometimes they skip. So why would they skip? Is it that they didn't know? No, they do know, but they choose to behave differently. So behavioral issues are in most cases motivational issues. And then if you understand what motivates people, then you can better understand, okay, this is the context in which the behavior occurs. What if we change the context? And then you don't want to make it like trial and error. So you start analyzing the behavior.
When you talk about motivation, does that touch on business politics, where a person might want to do something different to the norm because that's going to show them up in a better light than a colleague or a competitor for promotion? So, could you just say a little bit more about, is motivation both good and bad? Is it, is there a black motivation and a white motivation?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
How would you, on a spectrum, is it really people behave differently because they want to use a sporting analogy, score a point over something, or that they just can't be bothered?
If you look at the functions of behavior, there's 4 functions of behavior. 3 of them is that people emit behavior, as we say it, in order to get something that they want. And that could be a social effect, like attention.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a tangible effect, like, for instance, a sandwich. So they show behavior in order to get the sandwich. And it could be a neurological or biological effect, like people that jump out of a plane wearing a parachute. And if you ask them, why did you jump out of the plane? They say, well, we do it for the fun or for the kicks. So those are the 3 basic functions in order to explain, okay, what is it that you get out of it? And the 4th function means that people behave because they try to prevent something or try to escape from something they don't want to happen to them. So if I would like to score a point over you, then it is because I am getting something that I don't want you to have. And that's basically a personal motivation in many cases.
Interesting.
So if you want to try to understand the behavior, you have to walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak, in order to better understand their perspective. Because from their perspective, their action is, in most cases, the most logical and most sensible thing to do, given the situation, given the circumstances.
Interesting. So lately there's been a lot of discussion around experience level agreements. And you mentioned earlier about the service manager, and I think we've all seen service level agreements that have been achieved but actually have been quite negative in their achievement. They haven't done anything for the user. So what do you see the relationship between experience level agreements and OBM? Because for me, experience level agreements is all about thinking of the other person to make sure that they're getting what they're expecting, not necessarily what you think you should deliver. Could you define an XLA? Could you give some examples of an XLA that you're familiar with?
Okay, let's start with the defining part. XLAs, experience level agreements, as I see it, they are on top of the more traditional service level agreements. So they are an addition, you could say, where the service level agreements tend to focus more on technical and operational indicators, like uptime and performance and so on. The XLA defines experience indicators. And those experience indicators, for instance, like customer satisfaction scores or net promoter scores or CES scores for the customer effort, these scores, they have a more personal touch, so to speak. So it's about an individual's experience with your goods or services. And that could be I like to call it a technical experience. For instance, if I use my computer and it responds well and it behaves as I expect it to behave, then my experience with the machine is all right. If I drive a car and the gears are shifting smoothly and it's not too much effort to shift left and right from the lanes and so on, then my experience with the car is well or good or even exceptional. But that is my interpretation of the interaction with the product. The same applies for interaction with other people who either deliver the product or support the product. And that's what in most organizations is defined as service. And it is the human interaction with the customer or the user that contributes to your customer satisfaction scores or your net promoter scores. And, okay, this organization distincts itself from other organizations delivering similar products or similar service simply by the way they treat you. So this is where the OBM part comes in. If you want to understand, okay, what is the best way we can treat our customer? So if you have a product that has unique qualities or unique attributes, you can be pretty sure that sooner or later you will have a me too kind of product that mimics those attributes or those functionalities. But we all also know that the people in your organization are the true distinction from other organizations. It's how your people treat your users or your customers that really makes the difference. So as we are shifting towards this experience economy, some may say that we're already in it, but let's say that we're still shifting that way. Those good customer experience and user experience is becoming more and more critical in my point of view.
And that's an interesting sort of explanation, Robert. But if I think about airlines, recently, whenever it was, 10 years, the low-cost airlines had come into business and people knew what they were getting. It would be 10, 20 euros. You could get a seat. It would take off absolutely on time. You couldn't take any luggage. And, you got from A to B. At the same time, established airlines, you would still be given a cup of coffee, you'd be given a roll or a bag of nuts or something in the seat, and you felt that you were being treated by a passenger. And then clearly with the low-cost airlines, there were no frills, but you got exactly what you expected. They've changed that these days with adding more and more service charges on the low cost. But when the premium airlines started to remove the free cup of coffee in the morning, it felt as though the whole value of flying with them had disappeared, and it was only a value of about 5 or 10 euros. Is that normal behavior when you're seeing something that has a low cost and it's removed from something you're expecting? Is that a normal reaction, or is that just me overreacting because I've lost my €5 cup of coffee at my seat on an aeroplane?
Well, I think it's the result of how the organization delivering the traveling services is being managed. So if there is somebody high in the hierarchy demanding to cut costs in every possible way, then sooner or later someone will suggest, well, we could remove the coffee. We could remove the sandwich. We could remove the extra pillow. We could maybe change the leg room and add 1 or 2 more seats in the same plane, and then we make more money. And then from the airline perspective, it's logical because it brings them more of what they want. The number of passengers per flight increases. The amount of extra profit they make on each flight per customer increases. That's what they were looking for. And of course, that will bite them in the tail sooner or later, because then they start realizing that they start moving more customers per flight, but the customers are less happy. And once they have the alternative, they will try the alternative.
So, coming back to the XLAs, are there specific leadership skills that organisations need to focus on when implementing XLAs? Because it sounds as though it's as much around psychology and understanding human behaviour than it is about sort of theoretical management, spreadsheets, bar charts, and schedules. So, in your experience, what are those specific leadership skills organisations should be developing within their managers to maximise this whole concept of customer first experience level agreements?
Yeah, there's two things I'd like to mention about leadership behavior. The first one is that people in leadership positions, whether they are in formal leadership positions or more informal one, through their own behavior, they have major impact on something like employee satisfaction, employee engagement, and their performance. And many leaders think that it is a major part of their job to find errors amongst their employees in order to correct them. And they correct them because they want to improve. So they feel, in many cases, even compelled to come up with the solution for the problem themselves. Or even worse, they correct it themselves. And those type of leaders unintentionally have a counterproductive effect on both morale and performance. Because what happens in the mind of the employee is that they start associating their leaders with error correction. So every time the leader shows up on the shop floor, they say, oh, here he is again. What did I do wrong this time? Right? And if you ask those people, are you engaged for this organization? They say something like, yeah, initially I was, but based on my experience with this organization, I might be looking for a job somewhere else, maybe in the same line of business. But and if you ask some more questions, then it's basically that they escape their leader and not their job. So leaders in leadership positions, of people in leadership positions, should understand how they have impact on organizational performance and morale. So what they should be doing instead, from my perspective, is that they have people come up with ideas to improve. So of course they, in many cases, know they made an error or they didn't perform as well as they should. And instead of punishing and verbally or physically correct them, you could also challenge them and say, okay, what could you do to improve next time? And by the way, what is it that you need from me in order to enable you to improve? And then they can have this something that they call ownership of their own improvements. And that if you create this environment in which you support the improvement initiatives, make sure that it gets done, and then catch them in the act of doing something correctly, and then showing appreciation over that, you will change morale rather quickly. Is my personal experience.
That's a great expression. Catch somebody in the act of doing something correctly. I really like that.
All right. So thank you. It's not something that I came up with. Again, it's inspired by words from Mr. Daniels, but I think it's bullseye. It's in my perspective. From my perspective, I see leaders strongly focused on, okay, what goes wrong, and everything that goes right or that goes well is being neglected, because that's what I hired them for and that's why I pay them, so why bother, right? And yet I need to focus on the other side where there's something going wrong because that needs improvement. So they are basically trained to behave ineffectively. So we want to change that and see if we can catch somebody in the act of doing something correct. Another skill I think leaders need to develop is that they should be able to specify this behavior that they want from people more succinctly and more accurately. For instance, if you ask leaders, what is it that you want from people, and they say something like, I want them to be more ownership, or I want to be more proactive, or I want them to be more engaged, or whatever it is that they want. And there's two things wrong, so to speak, with that. One is that being engaged or being more proactive, how does that positively influence customer experience? So could you point out a cause-effect relationship between being more proactive or more ownership in relationship to the customer or user experience? Maybe they can, but my guess is that it will be a long story with lots of buts and ands and ifs. So people then start interpreting the words and say, okay, I think my leader or my manager wants this from me. So they are basically left in the dark. The other one is that if you leave the people in the dark, then you cannot catch them in the act because it's based on interpretation. So the more precise you are in what it is that you want, and the more you are able to link a specific action to an improvement, in this case to customer or user satisfaction, the more you will be able to catch them in the act. And by catching those people in the act, you are actually reinforcing those behaviors. And once you reinforce them, you will get more of it.
So when we look at XLAs and we look at, say, a KPI, and I haven't seen many KPIs associated with XLAs, so I'm on very thin ice here. So, do you have any suggestions or tips from your work on OBM when it comes to performance indicators that would make sense with XLAs?
I need to confess that I'm not an expert in the XLA area myself. But I do have my bag of experience with the service level agreements. And my interpretation is that if you want to define or select your XI or your KPI, you have to be very picky. For instance, if you have too many of those indicators, people get easily confused when it comes to prioritizing their actions. Which indicator is today most important and why? So they start shifting priorities, which will influence behavior. So it's much better to have just one or two main indicators, and everybody should understand why those are the indicators that you have selected. And if you can't explain why you are measuring these and how these indicators improve customer or user satisfaction in this area, you should stop using that indicator. The simple reason is that if you use a KPI, you're basically predicting consequences for the performer. And those consequences could be good or bad. And what usually happens if you are scoring well on an indicator, you're ignored. And if you score bad on an indicator, you get negative management attention. So that's the first thing, that you need to be able to explain why are you measuring these indicators and not too many indicators, and look for cause-effect relationship. And for another tip could be that your XIs are linked to something that you could call voice of the customer and the customer journey. So if you look at a customer journey, basically it's a series of steps or a series of activities or a series of interactions that they have with your products and services. And if you have such a touch point, if you like, what is it that you need to measure in order to improve on the the minute or the second that your customer has this interaction. And then it's about the behaviors that you want to see from your service personnel, your service staff, that enhances this customer journey, this customer experience. And those needs to be measured in order to enhance the experience for all customers.
So this is really about, if you're on a service desk, it's not how many calls can you get in an hour. It will be how many satisfied customers could you talk to in an hour.
Yes, because if you are on a service desk, the time that they will call you is not because they have a compliment to share. In most cases, they have an issue with the services that you provide or the products that you have delivered. And they need assistance, and they want it basically first time right. And first time right may take longer. So if you start managing your service desk personnel on time, there's a good chance it might be at the expense of quality and customer satisfaction.
Have you worked with many clients that have made that shift, that they've gone from, we want you to deal with as many calls or as many issues as possible within an hour, to it doesn't matter how many you deal with, but what we're looking at is satisfied customers at the end of your call? Because I would imagine that's quite a big transition for most people to make.
I have been a team lead of a service desk myself, and that's exactly what we did. So from my own experience, we had this problem, for instance, that people that were answering the phone, you have to imagine this picture where there's a group of people, like 8 or 10, and their only job is that when the phone rings, they pick it up, and then they introduce themselves, and then they ask, okay, and how can I service you, or how can I help you? That doesn't happen once or twice a day. No, that happens quite often every day. So what they are saying when they introduce themselves becomes, how can I help you? And the customer doesn't even know who's on the phone, for instance. Yep. And another problem was that they were way too familiar with the customer. And the customer basically demanded some more respect. And when we asked, okay, why are you so familiar with your customer? And they said, well, it's company policy. And I said, okay, show me the policy. And they were looking for the policy, and there was no such line in the policy that said you had to be very informal communications with your customer. So they were acting from a wrong starting point, so to speak. So we addressed those things, speak more slowly so that everybody can hear what you're saying, that they know who's on the phone. And that takes more time. And be more formal, which also may take more time. And one of the results that we had was that the customer satisfaction increased. We even got compliments. They didn't have any compliments for months, but most of the time they got complaints. And suddenly they start receiving compliments about the professional interaction. And what I did is, when I received such a compliment through my email, I printed it out, put it on the wall, and said, look, this is what we're looking for. This is what we want more of. So that was a very small thing to do, but it had a major impact.
Robert, it's fascinating talking to you. I'm sure we could go on for a lot longer talking about human behaviour, and because at the end of the day, that's what it's down to, isn't it? It's the behaviour, it's the interaction between individuals that makes the world go round. Many thanks for spending the time to talk to me, and thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be on this podcast.
Excellent. Well, I'm off to try and catch somebody in the act.
Right. That's what we're looking for, yes.
Bye, Robert.
All right. Thank you. Bye.